quick note before this episode begins. Um, in this episode, I make a pretty big mistake. I keep referring to one of the Democratic candidates in CD4 in Arizona as Kai Simpson and not Kai Newkirk. Why I do that, I'm not completely sure. I think it's because in my head I was thinking about former Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson. And so when I thought Kai, it just Simpson popped into my head. So anyway, throughout the episode, I think I refer to him as Kai Simpson and not his actual name, Kai Newkirk. That means I should be apologizing to him, to his supporters, and to his campaign. I'm sure his campaign are big listeners to this show. Anyway, without further ado, here is myself and Troy. From the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, this is Politics in the Past with Robert Ferguson, brought to you by the Center for American Institutions. And I am joined today by a guest from, what I guess our chief Arizona political correspondent, Troy Holderby. For those of you lucky enough to be watching this on video, you can see Troy's lovely professional face here. Troy, thanks so much for jumping on with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
So, Troy, since the last time you were on, actually, your job titles have changed a little bit. Are you able to update us all?
Yeah, so I recently was promoted, got a great opportunity. So I'm now the deputy political director for an Arizona-based political consulting firm, NextGen P. So we do just about everything, but our main two services are polling as well as campaign management. So we do all of that across the state. We have a lot of races in Nevada we're running right now, as well as some projects in Arizona. And so far, we've done statewide polling in Arizona, Florida, and we're doing some stuff in Tennessee right now.
Okay. Okay. So the reason I really wanted to have you on this week is Arizona. The primary date is July 22nd. Do I have that right?
21st, yeah.
21st. Okay. So coming right up here. So this should hopefully be a good preview for everybody who's tuning into Arizona primary day next week. Um, Troy, your group has done quite a bit of polling here in the state, and as far as I can tell, some of the best polling that's been done on the state, especially on the Republican side, which is where, at least it seems, most of the energy is this primary season. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've done just about as many polls as some of the top Arizona pollsters have done. But ours tend to feature the largest amount of respondents. So hopefully we have a bit more accuracy in some of the data that we get there. Um, and it's pretty much all behind the Republicans right now. You know, every Republican office, at least all the important ones here in Arizona, all have primary races. None of the Democrat ones do, the statewides. There is a contentious race right now in CD1, so that's going to be kind of central Phoenix, Scottsdale area, as people are competing for that race over David Schweikert, who stepped down from that. So that one has a lot of contentious primaries on the Democrat and the Republican side, as well as we're seeing some interesting stuff happen in CD4, which is where Arizona State University is on
Right.
the Democrat side.
Yeah, I see that Stanton, who's the incumbent, is being challenged by a Kai Simpson. Is that his name? The Democrat?
Yeah, so current Congressman Greg Stanton is having a interesting primary challenge right now by Kai. So Kai is a DSA Democrat Socialists of America candidate who's running against him. Now, we don't really know how that Democrat primary is going. There is polling from Kai's campaign that says that they're about half and half. Realistically, that's kind of, I think pretty much everyone is skeptical of that, just because he's a new challenger and Stanton is so established in the district.
Yeah.
But what we do see is Stanton is putting a lot of polling or a lot of ads and a lot of money into the race right now. So maybe that's giving us a hint that it's a bit more shaky than we would
Mhm.
expect.
Yeah, I saw Simpson's team out in front of Arizona State with the Palestinian activist, the Gaza activist yesterday. So
Yeah.
that should give you an indication of where the energy of his campaign is. Whereas Stanton, as far as I know at least, seems to be a little more established. Is sort of ensconced in the establishment of the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Kai also, he has some scandals coming out right now, particularly over, I think, some sexual misconduct or something like that in the past. So it's a very interesting race for sure.
Yeah, Simpsons, from what I can tell, is a career activist. That would be how I would describe him. His entire career has been working in various types of left-wing radical activist circles. And so that's kind of culminating in this run for Congress. Anyway, sorry to distract you because we're not really here to talk about the Democrats in CD4.
Yeah.
As interesting as maybe that race has become, and maybe we'll have more to parse about that in a couple of weeks if Kai Simpson does surprise us, and that would, I think, quite significantly shake up the CD4 general election race.
Uh,
But
Definitely.
anyway, so we'll get to CD1 here in a second, but or in a few minutes, I suspect. But let's talk about the statewide races. The Senate, there's obviously no Senate race up in
Correct.
2026. So that has put a lot of the pressure on the governor's race. So, Troy, do you want to characterize how the Republican governor race has gone?
Yeah, I mean, so right now there's two front runners for the office. So there's former congressman, well, current congressman, Andy Biggs and David Schweikert, who are running. Since about the beginning of the race, though, Biggs jumped in the governor's race, and both the polling as well throughout the entire race has had him ahead. About halfway through the race, we saw David Schweikert jump in for the governor's race. Then there's some other candidates who are running, but they poll around 1 to 2%. So they're not really many serious challengers for that.
What did your polling indicate in that race?
Yeah, I mean, so in that race, it pretty much confirmed what we've already seen throughout it, which is just Andy Biggs will be the next Republican governor candidate. So in our poll that we did, we had about 1,700 respondents, which is the largest we've seen of any poll in Arizona for statewide races. And in that, Biggs polled 66% compared to David Schweikert's 10%. And Schweikert has stayed around that 10% mark throughout all of the results we've seen. But what's interesting is Biggs keeps getting higher and higher. So he's starting to reach the point now where he may even make an historic mark and be the highest Republican candidate uh, votes for a primary in the history of that race. The most competitive one, I think, was 80% by Jan Brewer. Um, and so, as we're seeing him climb higher and higher, and the undecideds get less and less, we're
Mhm.
expecting he can approach that.
So, what do you attribute Biggs' success in this race to?
Uh, it's going to be his name ID and his strong conservative values. So Biggs is well known as one of the top congressmen from Arizona, and he's been in Arizona politics for the longest time. He started out in the state house, then the state senate, and worked his way up there. He also has a lot of backing behind Turning Point, and so a lot of movement is going there. One of the rallies Charlie Kirk hosted before he passed away was for Andy Biggs. Um, and so, because of that, uh, pretty much all of the conservative grassroots, all the Republicans are putting all of their effort behind Andy Biggs. There is a much more moderate kind of Republicans from the McCain days. Those are the sorts of people who are voting for David Schweiker.
Okay. So it's still a lingering. So Schweikert has the lingering old guard vote, but has been dwarfed by the newer energy behind Biggs. Is that sort of an appropriate characterization?
I think that's appropriate. Andy Biggs is a patriot. He's a great congressman for representing his district and Arizona. And Schweikert's great as well, but he's always been much more of a backrooms kind of guy. Not saying that in the bad way, but he's always been a lot more focused on getting results, especially fiscally. He's on Ways and Means. There's a lot of work behind that, and that's a lot less public facing than a lot of the work Andy Biggs has done.
Right. I mean, I was just going to say that one of the things that, Schweikert being so prominent on Ways and Means, Schweikert is one of those people that if you're on Ways and Means, that means you actually have to do work in Washington and you can't spend time kind of being public facing. A lot of your time is spent drafting and writing and rewriting laws, and doing, and looking at ways how money can be appropriated, which does put you in a difficult position when you're running for a bigger, more prominent role, right?
Yeah, well, and one of the kind of things with that, and we're considering, who a Republican's going to choose the next governor candidate, is how Schweiger got into the race. So originally it was Andy Biggs and Karen Taylor Robeson who were running, and both had received the Trump endorsement for that race. Now KTR decided to step out of the race because she wanted to have all the Republicans behind a candidate that we could all support against the challenging race, which is going to be against current Governor Katie Hobbs, the Democrat candidate. Um, Once she stepped out, though, Congressman Schweiker did step in for that. But there's kind of rumors about how he got into it, that there was a political consultant in Arizona who pushed Schweikert to step down, run for governor, and then had the former Republican Party chairwoman, Gina Swoboda, run for his congressional seat. After results showed that she wasn't going to do very well in that, she's currently running for Secretary of State.
Right. I saw that. Interesting. So, unlikely, I mean, I think this race has been basically baked in for a long time. That's been my sense. One of the other problems, I mean, I think basic name ID has been Schweikert's biggest hurdle from day one. There may be an ideological challenge, but or an ideological misalignment between Schweikert and the median Arizona Republican voter. But I mean, name ID is the biggest problem. I mean, he's controlled a competitive district, as you mentioned, the Phoenix, Scottsdale, part of the Valley. As far as I know, he has very little presence outside of his district inside in Arizona, which make for people who maybe have holidayed here, maybe your experience of Arizona is just the valley, and that there's a lot. Maricopa County is it certainly the straw that stirs the drink, but there's a lot of population, a lot of Republican voters that don't live in the valley.
Yeah, definitely. And especially outside of the valley, the Republicans are very conservative. One of the things too, when it comes to Schweikert, is what name ID he does have. Um, there may be an issue with his perception. So he's been in one of the top races in the entire country every time he's ran, because it's such a close race between the Democrats and the Republicans. Schweikert historically has always won that by about 1 to 2%. And the Democrats have put tons of money behind that race. So what that has gotten you is, if you do know Schweikert, you might be familiar with a lot of the attacks that came out about him. He had some fiscal scandals in the past, and so the Democrats pushing really heavily on that in the past will now get Republicans who do know him, do know his name. When they think about him, they might go, I don't know if this is the right guy for it because of that. Um, but yeah, the interesting thing, one of the things we're seeing is that even within Schweigert's own district, Andy Biggs is still significantly leading. Uh,
Yeah.
don't quote me exactly, but I think even within his district, Biggs still has around a 40% uh, point over Schweigert for the primary.
Well, that's pretty significant. It's also true that if you're Schweikert, and again you're running in the most competitive district in Arizona, which means that in order to win that district on a regular basis, you're going to have to win Democrats if
Yeah.
general election time, which requires you to calibrate your politics to be like Andy Biggs might win a Republican primary in CD1, but he'd probably have a hard time winning the general in November
Yeah. And we've always seen
against a strong
Republicans.
Democratic candidate.
Yeah, we always see Republicans go for the more conservative candidates. Obviously, the last governor's election, we had Kerry Lake as the nominee,
Mhm.
who I think without a doubt you can say is one of the most MAGA, Make America Great Again, Republican candidates out there nationwide. And so they've always kind of leaned that way, and it is the way the Republicans tend to lean.
Yeah, for sure.
Result.
It makes sense. I mean, it's the a Republican voter in CD1 is going to be more right wing than the median voter in CD1, right? And however, your median Republican voter and your median voter in Biggs's district, he's CD7. What's his district?
He is in. Oh, now I'm blanking on it. CD1. Excuse me.
No, that's Schweikert CD1.
Yeah. Oh, Biggs's
Big,
district.
yeah. What's Biggs's district?
I believe he is CD. I believe CD7.
Yeah, I
Correct.
think yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So your median voter in CD7 is probably not that much different than your median Republican voter in
Yeah.
CD7. So, okay. So Sh- Biggs appears ready to cane Schweikert here in the primary next week. What does that mean for Hobbs is on the Democratic side is not facing much of any competition as far as I can tell. And so we're set for a Biggs versus Hobbs general election. Have you guys been able to do any polling yet, or are you aware of any polling that has shown that yet?
Yeah. So there are a few polls out there for the general election. Um, and Katie Hobbs is still pulling ahead in most of them. Now it is pretty close, but Katie Hobbs is usually up by a few points in every single poll.
Okay.
And so a lot of the Republicans' thought on how we go about this is kind of why we saw KTR step down. We're going to need as many resources, volunteers, money as possible behind Biggs. And so that's really what it's about: is how do we get the message out there for the Republicans against Katie Hobbs? And
Mhm.
we're seeing some interesting developments now. I think Katie Hobbs currently has, I saw a report this morning, I believe she has around 3.6 million, or around 2.4 million cash on hand. Big so far has raised 3.6 million for his race, and he has, I also want to say, around 2 million as well
Okay.
there. So in terms of the resources, it's coming close. Katie
Considerable.
Hobbs already is putting out tons of
Right.
ads right now during the primary for her governor's race.
Mhm.
Other Republicans are still working on figuring out the primaries.
Right. Well, it's a considerable cash advantage that Biggs has. One of the things that I think there's this sort of notion where if you're running a competitive primary race, that's a waste of resources that can be, when especially if you're facing an incumbent or somebody who doesn't have to wage a primary race. And while that's true, a competitive primary race can get you money and can get you attention, which can be as long as you don't waste it. And I don't think Biggs has wasted it because from what I can tell, most of the Biggs advertisement seems to be being done by third parties. Um,
Uh, yeah, I mean
yeah,
they're
no,
having a lot of packs for sure. Supporting when it comes
yeah,
to his ads and all of that.
yeah. So, and frankly, I've actually seen, at least in Maricopa County, I'd say I've seen more ads for Schweikert, more money spent on Schweikert visibility than I have on Biggs. I've really only
Yeah,
seen big signs come out in the last week and a half.
yeah. Biggs is the guarantee more or less for the primary. So if you're Biggs's campaign and they have some of the best campaign staff in Arizona historically. His staff has won some of the most competitive races in Arizona before. Um, they're not going to put any money towards the primary. You're going to be wasting your resources because the fight is against Katie Hobbs, and that's been the fight the entire time. That's always been their messaging: is we need to
Mhm.
get Katie Hobbs out because of some of the poor policies, some of the disastrous policies she's made.
Right. What we're seeing in the general though is Hobbs up a few points. How much did Hobbs beat Lake by?
Hobbs beat Lake by around 200,000. I want to say 287,000 votes
Okay.
against Kerry Lake. It was an extremely close race
Right.
previously. And that was without her as an incumbent, Katie Hobbs.
Right.
She was the former Secretary of State at that point.
Okay. So we're in for a rerun, highly competitive election in November. Given that Maricopa County will be counting the votes, we should find out sometime in 2028 who won. Um, and but are there any other? So, what are some of the other statewide race on the Republican side that are competitive here?
Yeah, so the most competitive race on the Republican side outside of the governor is going to be Kimberly Yee versus Tom Horn for superintendent of public education, which really goes to one of the most hot issues in Arizona being ESAs, empowerment scholarship accounts. The legislature had created this account that basically allowed parents to take the public money that would have been given to their child to the public school to handle and gave it to the parents and said, you can use this how you would like for your child education. You use it for homeschooling, to pay tuition at another school, to really give parents the ability to choose the education for their children, because Arizona public education has always been one of the worst performing in the country. Although there's some nuances there with those statistics being Maricopa County versus outside counties public education. Um, and so we've always seen generally the way the race is being framed is Tom Horn, who's the former superintendent of public education. He's held that office for who can remember. He's held that for a very long time. Um, he generally is the more pro limiting ESA candidate. While Kimberly Yee, the current treasurer for Arizona, she is much more in favor of empowering, strengthening the current ESA program. And so we're seeing a very tight thing. The first poll that we did had Horn up by about 8%. Now we've actually seen it flip the exact opposite way. And now Yee is up in that race by about 8% as well. So it's a very close race. And it's the independents. They seem to be leaning more towards Yee, who's going to be that more conservative candidate, as we tend to see primary voters lean towards. Excuse me, not independents.
Right. It's yeah. So for those who are listening from outside of Arizona, the ESA seems to be the major state local political football that is at least lingering in the background. Unless some other emergency seems to explode into the ether or into the arena before November. Um, I expect that the ESA program is going to be the most politically volatile or get the most political attention. Um,
Yeah.
and as
Already there's currently two ballot measures out
yeah,
about ESA, for example.
are there?
Yeah. So there's
Um,
two ballot measures. Both are to restrict ESAs. They're being pushed, of course, by the left, by the Democrats in Arizona. And they're basically both an attempt at getting ESAs restricted. So they have a more restrictive one for the ESA program as well as one that is less restrictive. Because their main concern is that ESAs are, one, people are spending money on inappropriate things for education, as well as this is money that could be going towards our public schools, and it's not. And so we should fix that.
yeah, there's a great deal of misinformation. In fact, I'm working on a project right now, actually directly related to ESAs, trying to just myself. I mean, I'm new to Arizona. I'm trying to kind of understand them and how they work, especially for how it affects um, students, rural children. Um,
Yeah.
and it's something, school choice is one of those issues that has, I think, animated, it's certainly animated the right, but it's also animated the left, particularly states with really strong teachers unions who fear it's an assault on public education. Um, and in Arizona, the reality is, I just think most people don't know how it works, is my sense. Now that I've kind of gotten an education myself on how they work, um, I must say the educational environment and firmament in Arizona is incredibly dynamic, incredibly interesting, and considerably better, I think, than most people imagine it is.
Yeah. When people see that, it's a two-part issue. One, Arizona's always historically been conservative. And so Arizona has had some of the most lax laws regarding education. They've always been much more pro putting it in the hands of parents. For example, there's pretty much zero restrictions if you want to homeschool your children and what that looks like. While many other states have requirements for what subjects you teach, testing, and to making sure you're keeping that up, Arizona puts it in the hands of parents. The other issue we see has always been kind of about the state of public education. Arizona public teachers and teachers in general are extremely underpaid, as well as there's not many resources for them, and Arizona public education generally has always ranked lower nationally. But you have to nuance that a little bit. Arizona has one of the highest Hispanic populations. So you have first time students coming in who are maybe immigrants. And so they're navigating the public school system here for the first time. They may not be a native English speaker. So, one, a lot of that is going to drag down test scores because if you've had generations of your children going to schools here, you're going to be able to help them more navigate that system. You also have Maricopa County, which is actually one of the top counties in the country for education. Meanwhile, every other county in Arizona extremely underperforms. And that really is the issue. There's always been a lot of resources to get teachers out to these rural schools, and it still is a struggle.
It's hard. I mean, one of the schools that I've been looking at is I'm not going to mention the town because I don't think it's right to, but the school is actually really good. Um, but you realize the challenges that it's a public school, and you just recognize the challenges that this community has gone through in order to establish this school, in order to keep it as good as it can possibly be. Just the structural challenges, the social challenges that face it are astonishing, and it really speaks to the community's ability to be able to put this really to make sure that this public school is available for
Yeah.
students. And anyway, I don't want to step on my policy piece that's going to be coming out, but anyway, it's something to watch, and I think the country is going to want to watch this issue. Um, Regardless of how you feel about school choice, Arizona is where the attention is because it is the most, I'm going to say liberal. I don't mean left wing. I mean, as far as individual choice goes, it has the most flexibility currently. And
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway,
Well,
let's
that's
sorry,
been
Troy.
used for too. Yeah, we'll move on after, but that's also been a huge benefit in a lot of ways too. You've also seen Arizona as one of the pioneers of bringing back classical education.
Mhm.
That was pretty much my story. I started out going to public school, DF student. I did terrible in it. And my parents decided to put me into a Great Heart School, which is one of these innovative classical schools coming back. And in that, I was able to actually become a straight A student. Um, and so we're seeing a lot of that being a strength as well with the freedom of education, as well as, there are drawbacks from time to time.
Sure. And I mean, I think the thing that my policy paper is going to show is the drawbacks are actually lower than I thought they were. To be honest. So anyway, but again, we can talk about that another time. We're here to talk about polling.
Yeah.
Troy. So let's the we talked about superintendent of education as far as the statewide rule goes. What about Gina Svoboda's race for Secretary of State? Have you guys pulled that one?
Yeah. So Adriana Swoboda is the former Arizona Republican Party chairwoman. Um, and she first ran for CD1 against some of the current candidates that are in there now. After she didn't do very well when it comes to pretty much her entire campaign for that, she then switched over to run for Secretary of State or Secretary of State against Alex Collin. So Alex Collin is uh, he's a current state representative as well as an attorney. And he's been one of the biggest guys when it comes to election integrity, which is the primary job of Secretary of the State, is to make sure that the elections are properly accounted for and all their securities are in place. So they're the two candidates, Gina Swoboda, Alex Collin, and currently Collin is leading in the races. He's been leading in it. I believe our poll had him up by about 20% plus a few points from that. But he is the front runner for it. The thing with that race, though, is it still has a large amount of undecided.
Right.
And that's really what we're seeing with all these races, besides the governors, is just so many undecided
Yeah.
Republicans. And that is the most notable thing about these primaries.
Well, that's pretty typical, I think, especially in statewide races that don't get much attention, is that people really don't spend time getting to understand what they're doing until the day or two before they vote.
Yeah.
You'll see signs around here for candidates in these races, but you really don't know much about them But anyway, all right. But the other high profile race is not the statewide race. It is to fill David Schweikert's seat in CD1.
That is a very high profile case
Right.
or race. Yeah.
And so CD1, we've alluded to it a few times here already. It is one of the most competitive districts in the country. You'd have a hard, and so, which means that unlike most races, frankly, for Congress that are pretty clearly going to go R plus or R plus or minus almost double digits. This one is really tight, and so that means there's a lot of candidates on both the Republican and the Democratic side. But let's start with the Republican race because I know that's where your guys' attention has been. Who are the candidates and what are you seeing?
Yeah, so there's currently three candidates running for CD1 on the Republicans. There is Jay Feely. Jay Feely, former NFL football kicker. He was previously endorsed for. He's previously endorsed by Trump to go and run in Andy Biggs's congressional district once he ran for governor. Then there is also current state representative Joseph Chaplik. He actually stepped down to run from this race due to Arizona law. And so he's running in that race as well. And then there's a third candidate, John Tribeau, who is a kind of an outsider. This is his first time stepping into politics. Who is a former, worked in the White House doing foreign policy, I believe, as well as a AI and businessman.
Interesting. Okay, so what's your polling showing?
Yeah, so our first poll this is our first poll pretty early in the race with those two candidates. Had Chaplik up by a few points. Again, large amount undecided. I want to say Feely and Chaplik were both in the teens. Our latest poll that came out probably about a month ago at this point, maybe 3 weeks ago, had Feely up way more than we were expecting. The thing with this race that's very interesting is Chaplik has always been a very strongly supported candidate by the grassroots. The grassroots absolutely love this guy. Jay Feely stepping out from his race, he is carpetbagging the race, whether we want to say it or not. So that initially had a lot of issues with him. But we are seeing is that Feely has the Trump endorsement and Chaplik doesn't. And this is one of those tests to see what does the Trump endorsement mean? What does it carry? Not only that, but he was also one of the top candidates chosen by the NRCC when it came to races they were going to support. So out of the gate, Feely has NRCC support, and we're seeing that be a huge thing. He has way more staff and currently way more funding in the race.
Okay, so I want you to clarify something here for me, Troy. Feely, you'd initially said Feely was tapped to run in Biggs's old district, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Or Biggs's current district, I should say. And then
Yeah.
he decided to run in CD1?
Yeah. So originally it was Feely and former Sheriff Mark Lamb running for that district. It was a third candidate, Daniel Keenan. I believe he formerly did a lot of real estate development. Now my firm had done a poll in that race very early on, and we had seen that despite the Trump endorsement there for Feely, Lamb polled, I want to say 70% in that race. He could just walk in more or less because one, he is a very public figure if you're from Arizona. Two, very well loved. And three, that's where he was sheriff, and also there's a very strong LDS community there in that district, and Lamb himself is LDS, which is a huge benefit if you're running in that district.
Right.
After that poll came out, it basically was at this point, Lamb could walk into office. Because of that, Trump gave the endorsement to Lamb for that district as well, and encouraged Feely to go run in CD1, which is why we saw him move over there. But that's not his home district.
Okay. By the way, Lamb has my favorite signs I've ever seen. Just the slogan says, "You tell him I'm coming."
Yeah. He's got some great marketing going on. He formerly he ran for US Senate against Carrie Lake in her run back in 24.
Okay. Anyway, he's a okay, so that accounts for the shift of Feely over to CD1. But the shift meant that Trump endorsed Feely in 1 and then endorsed Lamb in 7 or whatever that number, whatever district that is.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that and so despite Chadlick's and who's the third guy? Why can't I think of his name in one?
John Trudeau.
John Trudeau. Despite
Yeah.
their, I mean, I think pretty deep grassroots and Republican party bona fides, they aren't getting they don't have, because they don't have that endorsement. They seem to be struggling a little bit.
Yeah, it really is. An interesting thing about that race is, in my opinion, John Trudeau is the most similar candidate to Schweikert. Um, but what really had Schweikert hold down that district was because of his connections with it. He had always been a very constituency facing congressman as well. And so his constituency absolutely loved him. Um, Now that we're seeing it open up, again, comes back to where do the Republicans lean in Arizona? They always lean more conservative. And so you get the Trump endorsement, plus he is crushing Chaplik when it comes to fundraising.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's one of the advantages that Feely has. He's got name recognition.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a Politico to know who he is.
Yeah. He was a former kicker for the Cardinals, I believe. And one of the top ones as well. Not only that, and then he became an NFL broadcaster.
Right.
People know him, especially.
Yeah. I was going to say, in fact, if people don't know him as a kicker, they know him as a broadcaster. So that that definitely helps. That element of celebrity certainly helps. His marketing's very good too. It's whoever. By the way, all of the marketing firms, including yours, I'm sure, that do some of the campaign management, and so who you guys outsource to or whatever. In Arizona, you guys are doing great work across the board. Just about every piece of marketing I see is really, really good. So good for you. At least certainly on the Republican side. There's some Democratic stuff that I think is a little childish, just as far as like the graphic design goes. But that's
Yeah.
that, but that might work. So who am I? Who am I? I, it is what it is. So who is in CD1? Who is running on the Democratic side?
On the Democrat side, we have Shaw. Here, 1 second. We can actually go ahead and get everybody on there. That's where I'm less familiar with.
Sure, I understand. That's not where your work has been.
Yeah. Um. So we have. Here we go. So the current candidates we have there are Amish Shaw. So Amish Shaw was the former Democrat nominee for that district against Schweikert. We also have Jonathan Treble, Rick McCartney, and Marlene Galan Woods, who are running in that district.
All right. Do you know of any polling that's been done on their race?
I want to say there's been not as many for the Republican race that we've had. There's a few polls out there, and I believe it shows Shaw is tied closely with another candidate.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise. That's my sense too. Just
Yeah.
kind of being around that district a little bit. It's a yeah. So this is really worth. This is a very interesting race, and it's going to be a really interesting race come November, especially if Feely, I think, assuming Feely wins the Republican nomination, because it's going to change the dynamics up pretty considerably from a close run establishment, um, deeply embedded constituency representative to somebody new.
Yeah.
And with a touch of celebrity, which again, I think we can all admit. I'm sorry to the Schweikert campaign for governor that David Schweikert has got a lot of really real positives, but he doesn't exactly bring that celebrity feeling to a race.
Yeah. Well, his old moniker is always Shady Schweikert. Both the Republicans and the Democrats were saying about him, those running against him. And it does kind of stick, funnily enough. CD1, that's going to be a knife fight. Amish Shaw is the former candidate from that who made it past the primary. Now the DNCC is supporting another candidate as well. Senator Mark Kelly just endorsed another candidate besides Shaw.
Okay, so Mark Kelly jumped in. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's going to be a knife fight. We really don't know how it's going to go. I'd say at this point, we're pretty confident that Feely will win the Republican nomination. Although we can't say for sure. In the
That's true.
Democrat one, we don't really know who we're going to be working with against.
Interesting. So, I mean, my sense is that you're going to see national, like national what's the word tectonics, or as the national winds might be able to affect that race one way or the other.
Yeah.
So Troy, Arizona is an interesting microcosm for some stuff that's happening nationally. Are you able to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that I think is one of the most interesting things about Arizona to talk about. Um, Arizona has always had a very strong presence. We can look over this on a broad view. Arizona historically was always Republican, and they had some very strong people nationally. You had Barry Goldwater, of course, in the '60s. You had John McCain, who was a senator. Uh, you're going to date me on this one. I'm probably going to say it wrong, but I want to say before 2016. I forget exactly when he passed. Um, and so we've always had a lot more of these kind of moderate, at least compared to today, more fiscal conservative people, more people who focus heavily on bipartisanship. Now we've seen Arizona split as we've had a lot more people move to Arizona from out of states, becoming more purple. I mean, it is a purple state. And we're seeing interesting stuff. On the Republican side, we still have that balance between kind of that fight between the old right and the new right coming up. And then on the Democrat side, we're seeing a lot of the progressives kind of come out now, the Democrat socialists. So the Democrats had always been kind of strong in Arizona, especially with people moving here, but we're seeing DSA candidates run a lot more. In the Tempe City Council election, a DSA candidate was elected for City Council. We saw currently Kai running, who's a DSA candidate as well. And Arizona has one of the strongest groups of active Democrat socialists in the country. There's a group called PSL, the Phoenix Coalition for Socialism and Liberation, something about that. I'm gonna put it wrong. So they originally came out of Oregon, and so they have a very strong group that they're building here.
Well, I mean, I'm going to do a shout out here. If you look up AZ Insights, the Center for American Institutions has a whole thing on that. That they've done some work on it. So anyway, so there is some their presence in Arizona is real and significant.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I wish I actually had there was a plan to do a podcast entirely about that, but it fell through, unfortunately. And
That would be very interesting to see.
I have now fully forgotten everything that I prepped for that, so I don't have it handy. Another time. But anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, we are seeing that interesting jump. We've seen across the country on the Democratic side this DSA push. I mean, I actually like I'm the pedantic academic is going to come out here for a second, and so I apologize for that. But I actually think what we're seeing is, they're calling themselves progressives, but I actually think the Democratic establishment are the progressives at this point. They're no longer liberals. I think they are progressives. And what you're seeing out of the DSA, they're calling themselves progressives because they don't like the populist word, because they like the right wing to have that word. But in reality, what you're seeing is the lefty populists. And these are lefty populists that are kind of a combination of um, anarchists, kind of hard socialist ideas wrapped up in a kind of a populist package. And they're running against the progressive establishment. And so it's a very interesting race. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
There are certainly some old-fashioned Democrats who are not true progressives. They're probably still kind of more in that liberal, the kind of at least like to think of themselves as being more liberal than progressive. But the reality is that the Democratic establishment, at least since 2018, at least since the end, or probably since the end of Barack Obama, is basically progressive, and the left-wing populists are running against that. And it's been curious to see how that's going across the country. And so here in CD4, we're seeing that with Kai Simpson running against Stanton. And I'll be curious to see. Troy, you might have a better insight on this, but is Katie Hobbs going to be able to actually get any energy behind her behind her campaign?
From everything I've seen, she's really struggling with it. So, and I agree with your analysis of that completely. The old Democrats fit way more when it comes when we're thinking about the political leanings as progressive. The new Democrats, majority supported by the youth, those are definitely the socialists, lack of a better word, the socialist populists. Um, and so we're seeing much less support when it comes to that behind Katie Hobbs. And I think kind of the support we saw against Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake really rallied Democrats together behind Katie Hobbs. Now Katie Hobbs is primarily leaning on her incumbency, as we're seeing a lot more young staffers in the Democrat side move towards supporting these socialist candidates, especially now that we're seeing them run for offices like Congress. We're seeing them actually starting to hold offices. That is moving the young people towards that heavily. On the ASU campus, which is where you're going to find um, pretty much all of your staffers for the left, especially in Arizona. There's definitely some coming out of U of A for sure. But ASU has always had this much stronger role when it comes to feeding people into government, into campaigns, into politics. You go on the Arizona campus, and there have been, uh, you know, there's been a march or a rally pretty much every other week during the spring semester and before, for these issues against, for example, ICE against Trump, run by PSL. And so, because of that, I mean, one of their top leaders was in one of my classes last semester, debating capitalism, funnily enough. But we're seeing all those people move toward those candidates. So it'll be interesting to see where that leads people, where that leads kind of going forward the next few years. How much sway are they actually going to have? A lot of them are supporting these uh, populist Democrat socialist candidates. So we may expect to see the left switch very heavily in Arizona to the point that we actually have a flip of what we were having before, where the Republicans were always struggling between the more moderate McCain Republicans and the more MAGA Republicans. Now we might see a switch as the McCain Republicans tend to die out a bit more. And we see that the Republicans are more unified as more MAGA candidates, and they stay like that, while the Democrats now have to deal with infighting between the old Democrats and the new
Mhm.
Democrats.
Sorry, I just lost you there for a second. Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, Troy, and one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really neat is that you said, you had one of their leaders in your class last semester. And
Yeah,
I
that
just
was
think
very fun.
that's fantastic. I mean, this is one of the things that we try to really promote here at the Center for American Institutions. I don't think people are going to be confused as to where Troy's political persuasion is on the podcast, and we have Jack on very regularly, who's definitely more of a Democrat, and we like to. One of the reasons that and Andrew, who regular listeners are going to get to know more and more, has a bit of a different political perspective than everybody. Jake Dewick, who's been on a few times, again, very different political persuasion. One of the things that I think is really great about what we try to do is we try to get all these people in a room together and we let them debate. We let them go along their own intellectual journeys. And because if you don't actually confront people, if you don't actually debate people, if you don't actually get to know people who are wildly different from you ideologically or philosophically, it kind of stunts your growth. And so, we're very proud of what we try to do here in Troy. And I know it could be sometimes. I think both sides will admit sometimes it can be frustrating when you actually have to deal with somebody who fundamentally operates from a different premise. But I think it's better for everybody in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been an issue going on since the early 2000s, especially heating up during the 2010s, of polarization in the country when it comes to Democrats and Republicans. And I'm sure probably both sides will argue some of that is good, some of that is bad. I'd say that, the Democrats want to argue that I'd say it's more bad, especially what the Democrats are doing based on what we say about political violence. But, that's definitely my persuasion. Um, no, the main thing I certainly can't speak well enough about the institute, and especially encourage if you're a current student or planning on going to ASU to get involved with it.
Yeah.
Some of my best friends on the Republican side go to the meetings regularly. They've really exploded on campus. And it's been a great opportunity for people to, one, have that dialogue. Two, they're being guided by some very bright people. They're really getting into nuanced political theories and arguments that you don't really hear, which
What
has been very exciting.
Well, one of the things that actually helps, I think, in extinguishing some of the real animosity that can exist between various sides is when you get to first principles.
Yeah.
Why do you actually believe what you do? Right? And then you can realize, oh, I'm this because this is my fundamental view, or I'm this because this is my fundamental view. Okay. We slightly disagree on that, and everything else makes sense because of it. And now we can be friends, you know? And because in the end, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, your neighbor might be a Republican or a Democrat, and you might be the
Yeah.
opposite persuasion of you, and you're going to be on the same. Your kids are going to be on the same football teams and whatnot. So
Yeah, and it really is probably a great demonstration of what politics really is. Um, there's two very different fields when it comes to actually governing versus campaigning. Campaigning is where this animosity is. Campaigning is where we're polarizing. Once you actually get into office, that's a whole different ball field. Completely different strategies, completely different groups. You might have people who are all maybe the same constituencies. For example, they're all, kind of MAGA constituencies. They're going to elect the MAGA candidate. They get into office, and turns out this candidate is doing a ton of bipartisan stuff, ton of moderate stuff that you don't see to get their bills passed. And that's really what it is. And what you find, especially in office, candidates who are, for example, MAGA, they don't tend to get a lot of stuff done. When they do get stuff done, and this is in terms like the amount of bills that they're passing, when they do get stuff done, there are always these very MAGA bills, and so there aren't a lot of them. When you get into office, you have to be able to work with everyone and get more bills passed, and that's what you see about some very interesting candidates. I think one of my favorite is John McGuire out of Virginia. He's a very MAGA candidate. He's doing a great job because he's able to work with people. He's actually working on a bill right now. Oh, I think it's great. It's going up for a vote that will basically create a moratorium on housing prices to allow young people to go and buy housing, which is very exciting to see. What it does is that it lets people who sell homes to a first-time home buyer, now they're able to go and actually, I believe it stops them having to pay taxes when they sell that house to a new home buyer, and it actually works against their uh, savings when it comes to selling their stocks.
interesting,
And so we're seeing a lot of stuff like that passed by some great candidates.
interesting. That is interesting. I'm curious about the economics on it, but that is very interesting. Okay, Troy, any final thoughts here on why people across the country should be paying attention to what happens in Arizona next week?
Yeah. Um, Arizona is a flipping state. It's a flip state. And I think that is the key thing. When we're trying to figure out what's going on in the country, you really have to look to, well, what states is the most contentious in? And you look at those states, Arizona has always been one of the most, I'll use the word poor performing flip states. It's always been that way. One, because it doesn't have as many electoral college votes as other states have. But when you look inside these states, you find microcosms. You're seeing some of the best work when it comes to Republicans and Democrats competing against each other. So, following states, especially like Arizona, where it's so contentious, you're really kind of able to see the front runners that are going to be coming out on the campaigning side of politics, as well as when you get into office. Um, so it's one of the top states I think to keep your eye on nationally if you're trying to figure out where things are going to be going. You have such a wide range of candidates, wide range of people in the back. Um, if you can know people in Arizona, you can know people in swing states. You're going to have a very good handle on politics generally for the country. I think even that was like Graham Plattner's quote, uh, who said, where Maine goes, so goes the country. Really, it's where Arizona goes, so goes the country. And that's going to be something very exciting to see. It's going to require a lot of hard work on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be Ohio, right, or
Yep.
Florida, and now it's Arizona. All right. Well, Troy, thank you very much for jumping on. I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, so good luck in the next week or so, and we'll have to have you on in the coming months to parse the results and get people set for November.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.